Hi guys, and welcome to every episode of The Simpsons Season 20 reviewed. So yes, Season 20 is here at last. Unlike the last few seasons, I'm actually somewhat familiar with this one, as I remember watching pretty much all of these episodes when they first came out. Of course, I don't remember everything about them, but I do have some sort of idea about what this season will be about. This season is obviously notable for being the first one to make the transition to HD, although that is only a half-truth, because the move does not happen until about halfway through. When we get to the episode in question, I will point it out. Anyway, before we begin, a thank you, as ever, to the Simpsons wiki, as well as to you guys for continuing to follow this series. With that said and done, let's get into it. Season 20, Episode 1, Sex, Pies and Idiot Scrapes. Homer and Flanders form an unlikely bounty hunting duo. Meanwhile, Marge unwittingly starts working at an erotic bakery. So my trivia here is that the character Wolf is a parody of Dog the Bounty Hunter, and my best moment was the montage of Homer and Ned trying to catch bail jumpers. So the season opener gets a 4 out of 5. This story was, at its heart, another look into Homer and Ned's complicated relationship. As far as that stuff goes, it was okay, but no more than that. They were a fun duo here at times, but Ned's motivation to continue doing the bounty hunting job got a bit mushy. Also, the ending of them falling into concrete, only for Ned to annoy Homer by reciting the Old and New Testament, did not really accomplish much from a character perspective. Also, Marge's subplot never really ended up going anywhere. There was a brief scene of Marge feeling betrayed that she was not told, but she soon stopped caring about that anyway, which made me as a viewer also stop caring. So you may be wondering why I even gave this a 4, given that I have been a bit negative so far. The reason this episode scraped a 4 was purely down to the action and the jokes. It was so over the top, especially in the third act, that I think it works. Homer and Ned failing to catch the criminals was fun, and the chase scene between them I thought was very well shot. Homer jumping on the side of the elevator while Ned was doing parkour up the stairs got a laugh out of me. I also enjoyed the scene between Skinner and Chalmers, when the erotic cake got thrown through their window. Because all of this was so fast paced and enjoyable, by the time the episode finished it felt like the 22 minutes had just flown by. In the end, this was a rare instance of the action sequences making up for an average storyline. Season 20, Episode 2, Lost Verizon. Bart gets Dennis Leary's cell phone after he chucks it away. Dennis lets him keep the phone, but he advises Marge to activate the GPS system in the phone to keep track of Bart. So, in one of Bart's pranks here, he uses Leary's phone to order a ton of New York Yankees hats, and this annoyed Leary, who is a big Boston Red Sox fan in real life. My best moment here was Bart prank calling different bars from around the world. This one is a 3 out of 5. This plot was a reasonable one on paper. Bart getting tracked by Homer and Marge had the potential to lead to some interesting moments between them. I was enjoying the early stages of Bart's shenanigans here, with him collecting balls at the golf course and running amok across the town. After the halfway point though, things fell apart a bit for me. The trip to Machu Picchu was kind of unnecessary, and the moral at the end was kind of predictable. And to be honest, it feels like Marge should have learned the lesson to let go a bit by now. The jokes for the most part added to the bland feel of the episode because they were not that good. The Dennis Leary cameo fell flat, as did numerous other stuff. As I said though, it was good to see Bart's prank call gag make a welcome return. It even had a little twist to it, and the ending shot of Maggie becoming a god in Machu Picchu was also nice. Overall, this was just about a 3, mostly due to the early stuff with Bart. Season 20, Episode 3, Double Double Boy in Trouble. Bart meets his doppelganger, Simon Westerfield, a member of the richest family in Springfield, and the two decide to switch places. So my trivia here is that the episode title is a reference to the Shakespeare line Double Double Toil and Trouble from Macbeth. It is spoken by the three witches near the start of the play, and my best moment was Mr. Burns explaining how his siblings died. This one is a 3 out of 5. So the premise here was very cliche and a bit sitcom-y to be honest. Despite that though, they managed to get in a few interesting looks at the differences between a rich family and a middle class family. It was done though through the lens of a kid, which I thought was a good move. It shows that in the eyes of a kid, Both lifestyles have their ups and downs, and it very much depends on the personality of the kid involved anyway. I also liked Mr. Burns here. It was nice to see him offer some genuine advice, and how he apparently disposed of his brothers and sisters was interesting to say the least. Once again though, I think the best bits here came early on with Bart's shenanigans and pranks. Then the third act with the trip to Aspirin was unnecessary and felt rushed. So this episode almost mirrors the last in that regard. It also mirrors it in quality, as it just about gets to a 3. Season 20, Episode 4, Treehouse of Horror 19. The 3 short stories this year are Untitled Robot Parody, How to Get Ahead in Dead Advertising, and It's a Grand Pumpkin Millhouse. So my trivia for this one is that the song playing while Homer assassinates the celebrities is Psycho Killer by Talking Heads, and my best moment was the Grand Pumpkin himself. This year's Halloween special gets a 4 out of 5. So I think this year's Treehouse of Horror does bounce back well after last season's disappointment. The first part here, despite the title, was an obvious Transformers parody that was fun enough and did not try to do too much. I don't know why they needed to hide themselves at the beginning though, but I digress. The end bit where they play table football with the townspeople was kind of cool actually. Part 2 had Homer as a celeb killer hunting down celebrities. The montage of him picking them off was well done, and the song to go along with it was very fitting. In fact, Homer's enthusiasm and surprising level of competence pretty much carries this part. Also, a mention to the scene where Krusty gets killed in the wood chipper. That's got to be one of the most gruesome scenes in the history of the show, to be honest. The final part is the best one here, and is probably one of the best ones in recent times. I like how the first half starts out very relaxed, with the Charlie Brown type style. Then things get crazy in a second, with the Grand Pumpkin coming to life. As I said, the Grand Pumpkin is the best thing here. He works his way into the role of the antagonist so well, as from his perspective, his actions are totally justifiable. I also like the way he delivers his lines, and a few jokes that he has. At the end of the day though, he is eating people, and is apparently a proud racist too. Because of all this, it is nice to see him get defeated in the end. The way it happened though, was not the best, as Tom Turkey is a bit lame, let's be honest. Overall though, I did enjoy this episode. It was fun throughout, and the animation helped enhance all 3 parts, as it was very good across the board. Season 20, Episode 5, Dangerous Curves. While on a trip to a cabin in the woods, Homer and Marge reflect on some history from their relationship. Bart and Lisa also recall some memories from their early days. My trivia for this one is that the system that Bart is playing his serial killer game on is a Game Boy Advance. And my best moment was seeing young Ned and Maud on their honeymoon. This one is a 2 out of 5. So this is yet another Homer and Marge flashback plot, which seems to be becoming a yearly occurrence at this point. This one was better than last year's That 90s show, although that's not saying much. I found this plot to be hard to get to grips with. There is a lot going on, and it even jumps between different time periods. One moment, it is Homer and Marge as teens, then it's them married with a young Bart and Lisa. I was also not a fan of the idea that Homer and Marge had even more marriage problems. I mean, the amount of times that either or both of them were almost tempted away by someone else at this point is almost comical. Giving them some kind of fling seems to be the only way the writers can add some conflict into these flashback episodes. There were a few moments I liked at least. I enjoyed the story of how the 2 random strangers that Homer and Marge were with became a couple themselves, and as I said, getting a glimpse of Ned and Maud's early marriage was cool to see. Other than that though, this was quite mediocre, and it was not a funny episode either really. Season 20, Episode 6, Homer and Lisa exchange crosswords. Lisa discovers she has an impressive knack for solving crossword puzzles, and enters a tournament. However, her feelings are hurt when Homer bets against her. So the song Word Up by Cameo is played during Lisa's crossword competition, and my best moment was Gil Gunderson hustling Lisa to win a crossword tournament. This one gets a 3 out of 5. So this was an okay episode, but I do feel like it very much borrowed material from a few previous ones. Lisa the Greek is one, with how Lisa got upset at Homer's gambling. I'm spelling as fast as I can is the other, where Lisa got involved in an intelligence-based competition only to lose at the last hurdle. Even the ending with the crossword message is a reference to My Mother the Carjacker. So yeah, all of this kind of makes the episode feel a little tired, and definitely loses at some points. There was some good stuff here though, which makes this a 3. I enjoyed Homer's breakup service while it lasted, but it did end abruptly. Also, Lisa's descent into complete obsession over crosswords was interesting in a way. The ending of Gil hustling her I enjoyed, just because it is rare to see this more mischievous side of him. So to summarize this one, the emotional side of things with Lisa and Homer I never really got into, and the plot did feel a bit rehashed at times. However, there was still a base level of enjoyment here, as well as a few funny moments. Season 20, Episode 7, MyPods and Boomsticks. Bart befriends a new Muslim boy at school and invites his family over. However, after overhearing them talking, Homer suspects they are terrorists. Meanwhile, Lisa gets a Maple MyPod. So the title of this episode is a reference to the 1971 Disney movie Bedknobs and Broomsticks. And my best moment was Bart pranking the Maple store. So this one got a 2 out of 5. I'm not a particularly big fan of how the plot was handled here. I mean, at first glance, it seems like an exploration of some of the prejudice that Muslims faced, especially post 9/11, and Homer of course is the one guilty of that. I say at first glance because once you actually get into the meat of the episode, no real point is made. I mean, I guess they try and make the obvious message about how you should treat everyone as individuals, which is fine of course. However, there was no real character dynamics going on here, and this Muslim family that Bart meets are essentially just used as a plot device. Not to mention, it is very cliché how Homer only hears half of a conversation, so he gets the wrong end of the stick on what's going on because of that. The ending where he tries to save them all is silly, but hey, I did like how everyone listened to him when he was screaming at them to get out, and the fact that he doesn't warn Patty and Selma is the icing on the cake of that joke. The Maple story was slightly better, I would say, especially the bit at the start with Bart talking over Steve Jobs. What Bart was saying was probably fairly accurate too, if we are being honest with ourselves. Other than that though, the jokes were not particularly good. The only one which I actually laughed at was Homer's thought bubble of Lenny saying, "The doorbell will tell you when they're here." Season 20, Episode 8, The Burns and the Bees. When Mr. Burns wins a basketball team in a poker game, he plans to build a new stadium for them. However, it will be on a site where Lisa is trying to save Springfield's bee population. So my trivia here is that Mr. Burns' net worth is revealed to be 1,800,036,000. However, after he takes a third quarter write-down of 804 million, it drops to $996,036,000. And that of course is why he gets kicked out into the Millionaires Club. My best moment was Mr. Burns singing My Country, 'Tis of Thee, Austria-Hungary. Obey your king. So, what did I think of this episode? I quite liked it. It gets a 4 out of 5. This episode was very focused on what it wanted to do. You had the story of Mr. Burns winning this basketball team, as well as the one of Lisa trying to save the bees. They cross over with each other well, when Mr. Burns destroys their home for his new stadium, and it all comes full circle in the end, when the bees get their revenge. It was quite a simple story structure, but it came together nicely, and the characters all played their role well. I liked Mr. Burns in particular here. It has been a while since he really got to show off his villainous side, and he certainly got to do that here. I like the concept of the billionaires/millionaires club, and how Burns is horrified at becoming only a millionaire. The funniest thing here though was of course Burns failing with the national anthem. Smithers having to inform him of all these historical events is just the icing on the cake. European Union? Good heavens indeed. Even outside of Burns, the jokes were solid across the board. The bees calling Bumblebee Man and Uncle Tom was quite clever I thought. So yeah, this is not an all-time classic by any means, but it was very solid, and an enjoyable way to spend 22 minutes. Season 20, Episode 9, Lisa the Drama Queen. Lisa makes a new friend named Juliet. They create the fantasy world of Equalia together, but Lisa gets worried when Juliet starts to treat Equalia as a real place. So my trivia here, which is kind of some funny animation, is that when Jimbo and Dolph are about to burn the Equalia book, Lisa's clothing is briefly pink instead of red. And my best moment was Comic Book Guy's Kung Fu class. So this one got a 2 out of 5. So on one hand, this episode did at least feel fresh. On the other though, this plotline was definitely not my style. So for me, it mostly fell flat. Let's start with a few positives first. I did like the episode more towards the beginning. It was nice to see Lisa make a new friend, and the classes that Lisa and Bart were forced to attend had some good moments. The art teacher was kind of alright, and seeing Comic Book Guy get brought down a peg or two by the kids worked well. As far as the rest of this though, I found it bizarre, and frankly a bit weird at times. As the story went on, Lisa's relationship with Juliet changed from being charming to a bit creepy, to be honest. I mean, Juliet was clearly a bit nutty as it was, but her asking Lisa to run away with her, and the way they were holding hands all the time, I mean, anyone would think these two were a couple. Now obviously they weren't, as they're just 8 years old, but it did seem a bit odd, and I wonder if that was the writer's intention or not. In terms of the fantasy sequences themselves, they were fine. I mean, they did not have much to the story, but they were nicely animated at least. The final and maybe biggest problem here was the jokes. There were not many to be found. The only one I did quite like was the Bart age 10 one, as Bart was sneaking out of the house after Lisa failed to. Season 20, Episode 10, Take My Life, Please. Homer recalls the time he ran for school president. After discovering that the real ballot box was hidden, he finds it, only to discover that he should have won. So my trivia is that this is the first episode that was released in HD TV, and as such it is also the debut of the new intro sequence. And my best moment was just getting a better insight into Homer's school life. So I gave the first HD episode a 4 out of 5. This was admittedly on the lower end of a 4, but a story that I was actually engaged in, along with a few decent jokes, got it over the line. The plotline of a source being able to tell you what would happen in an alternate timeline was very out there, but it's not like we haven't seen this type of thing in the Simpsons universe before. I mean, the casino fire guy, anyone? As far as the visions go, they were quite interesting. I liked how Homer and Marge still ended up together. The only real difference was that they were rich but never had any kids. And apparently, that is a reality which Homer would prefer, judging by his "I wanna live in the sauce" line. That was a line I found funny, by the way, and it's made even better by the absurd way in which he jumps in the sauce. It was also nice to see Principal Dondelinger back again. I like how he was depicted as this bitter old man on the golf course. Also, after the silliness that was that 90s show, it is nice to see some of the old references to Homer and Marge's past that we all know and love. As I said, I also just enjoyed seeing more of the day-to-day dynamic that Homer had in his school years. We usually don't get to see how he got on with other kids, for example. In terms of the jokes here, they were fine. To go with the source gag I mentioned earlier, I also liked the Bruce Wayne Batman joke, and how Homer just could not accept it. After all is said and done, I found this to be a worthwhile flashback episode that kicks off the HD era in solid fashion. Season 20, Episode 11, How the Test Was Won. As Springfield Elementary prepares for an important test, Bart and the other underachievers are sent to Capital City so they don't ruin the school's score. Meanwhile, Homer forgets to send his insurance payment on time, and has to prevent anyone from getting injured inside his house. So my trivia here is that during the scene in which Homer remembers the times he got injured, we see clips from 34 previous episodes of the show, and my best moment was that scene of Homer's pain montage. So this one also gets a 4 out of 5. Maybe it was true for the previous few episodes as well, but this was the first episode to kind of get me to notice that the traditional 3-act format of the show seems to be getting shaken up. There is a lot going on in these last few episodes, and the plot seems to change direction a lot of times. It is almost like there are 4 acts rather than 3 at the minute. I don't know if that is a good or bad thing, but it is something to be aware of for sure. Anyway, regarding the content here, I rather enjoyed it. I liked the satire about education running throughout the episode. It started out with the scenes in school, showing how traditional learning is often more about memorizing answers rather than actually processing the material and learning from it. This dynamic also came back into play at the end, where Skinner decided to actually take command for a change, and in turn, he taught the kids something in a practical way which they found interesting. It's true that it is easy to write so-called dumb kids off, but in all honesty, I think a large part of the problem is that the education system of, let's say, most countries is very rigid, and as such it simply does not work for a lot of kids. The ending of everyone randomly dancing to the song Footloose was just that, random. It may not work for some, but I enjoyed it. Maybe because I just like that song. In fact, I guess I'll give you guys a little personal story. Back in my school days, me and a few friends actually got onto the teacher's computer and played that very song in front of the whole class. So yeah, I found it quite interesting actually, that the children in The Simpsons did that exact same thing. Anyway, that tangent aside, I really did enjoy this episode. Along with the main plot, Homer's side one was almost as good. I like how over the top paranoid he was about anyone getting injured, and the montage of previous episodes was great. Some of the amusing moments here included Otto thinking he was driving a helicopter, and Nelson saying he stinks upon hearing about the Vice President assessment test. So yeah, I apologise if this episode review was a little long. I guess I just had a lot to say about it. Season 20, Episode 12, No Loan Again, Naturally. After being unable to afford a home equity loan that Homer took out on a house, the family are forced to sell it. However, Ned Flanders buys it and rents it back to them at an affordable rate. So my trivia here is that the title is a reference to Gilbert O'Sullivan's song, Alone Again Naturally, and that song was also referenced in the title of a previous Ned related episode, Alone Again Naturally, and my best moment was the scene of the family saying goodbye to the house. So I gave this one a 3 out of 5. This was certainly another interesting episode. I know that there are a fair few people who like this episode quite a bit, but to me there are a few key things which hold it back. For the most part, I think the plot is solid. It is simple and very character driven. Flanders is funny as usual, and him buying the Simpsons house just so he could rent it back to them is like an insanely kind thing to do. It feels like a warm moment too because of the build up in the scene before. They did a great job of showing how much that house means to the family, especially Marge. It was certainly not just bricks and mortar to them. However, the conflict which the plot hinges around was just not executed that well. The family went from being thankful to Ned to mooching off him so quickly that it came off as rushed. It also made them seem like jerks. Now you kind of expect that from Homer, but for Marge to turn this way seems a bit out of character to be honest. Not only was the initial turn from the family rushed, the ending where Flanders suddenly decides to forgive them was just as abrupt. These issues, along with the average jokes, does hold this back a bit for me. The only joke I found amusing was the overly polite guy saying, "We'll see you in court," to Ned. If you can manage to get past the issues here though, I can see why you would call this episode good or even great, as there is no doubt some good character stuff mixed in amongst it. Season 20, Episode 13, Gone Maggie Gone. Lisa goes undercover as a nun in order to save Maggie, who was accidentally taken in by them. While in the convent, Lisa uncovers a series of cryptic clues leading to a hidden jewel in Springfield. So my trivia here is that the scene where Kent Brockman loses it on air during his news segment is meant to be a parody of Bill O'Reilly in an episode of Inside Edition. And my best moment was just how the episode flowed and the atmosphere that it had. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. Now I was really tempted to give this a 5, as the story here was very ambitious in both scope and style, and they pull it off quite well. It was engaging with all the clues scattered throughout, and all of the side characters that get involved, like Skinner, Comic Book Guy, and Burns. Maybe you could argue that Burns was slightly out of place, but I don't think it was a big deal. Not only that though, there was actually a sense of adventure, as Lisa goes around the town in search of the gem. I think it helped the believability that Lisa was not always initially right with the answers. It made the whole thing seem like much more of a legitimate challenge. The reveal of the anagram is good in that regard. I like how sarcastic the nun was about the right answer being Maggie. The ending was kind of silly though, and the final joke of Bart sitting on the throne was extremely predictable. Still though, I can almost entirely forgive that, as the writers managed to put together a very fun episode that was engaging throughout. It also helps that the jokes were above average by this season's standards. Homer entertains with the pretend Maggie that he uses to trick Marge. I like how he felt the need to draw eyes on it, despite Marge being blind. The poison puzzle that Homer gets involved in is also a nice change of pace for this show. So yes, a very well put together episode overall. It just needed a tiny bit more, either in the form of the ending or the comedy to be a 5. Season 20, Episode 14, In the Name of the Grandfather. The Simpsons travel to Ireland so that Grandpa can have a final drink at O'Flanagan's pub, but the bar has become run down and empty. While drunk, Abe and Homer accidentally agree to buy it. So a bit of interesting trivia here is that this episode first aired on Sky One in the UK on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 2009. It did not air in the US on Fox until March the 22nd, which makes this the first episode in the history of the show to premiere in Europe before the US. And my best moment here was the family getting a hot tub. This one is a 2 out of 5. So this was another vacation episode, which I generally have not been a big fan of in recent years, and this one does little to break from that mold. I thought the first act with the hot tub was decent actually. It's just nice to see the family spend some time together, and they even invited Ned to join them, mustache, cap and all. Once they actually got to Ireland though, it was very typical stuff and seemed to drag. We know the format of travel episodes by now. The family goes sightseeing, while fitting in a bunch of obvious references along the way. None of the Bart, Lisa and Marge stuff was entertaining, and it took so long that the actual story of Homer and Abe buying the bar ended up being rushed. I mean, to be fair, it's not like that story was any great shakes either, but I would have liked a better ending than, oh, they're all just deported anyway, so nothing really mattered. Overall, I just felt there was something lacking in this episode. The activities in Ireland could have been a lot better, and the jokes were nowhere near funny enough. Season 20, Episode 15, Wedding for Disaster. After it turns out that Reverend Lovejoy didn't have a valid license, when he did Homer and Marge's wedding, they decide to get married again. However, Homer disappears just before the wedding starts. So a bit of trivia here is that during Homer and Marge's argument regarding the wedding, Maggie imagines them as King Kong and Godzilla. My best moment here was Maggie conducting the band at the wedding. So this one is a 1 out of 5. I'm really not a fan of this episode for two main reasons. One is that Homer and Marge getting married again is of course a very tired plotline. And if you watched my Season 8 review, you will know that I did not even like this premise when they did it the first time in A Millhouse Divided. This was an even worse version of that however, and it didn't have the good jokes to save it. As far as Homer getting kidnapped before the wedding, I did at least like how it wasn't Sideshow Bob. It was nice to see him in an episode where he was not like the big antagonist. However, the reveal that it was Patty and Selma, I was not a fan of. I mean sure, we all know they don't like Homer, but by this point, I would think that they've been through enough together, that they should have more respect for him than this. Especially Selma, for Christ's sake. I mean look at how bad what they did actually was. They literally illegally kidnapped him, only to torture him and try and split him up with Marge. Their nastiness just oversteps the line here for me, and it spoils the plot. That is not even the only bit of questionable characterization here. Marge is a bit off at times too, and comes across as unlikable with how she treats Homer. Yes, the happy ending tries to make amends, and Patty and Selma do get some comeuppance for their actions. It was just too little too late though, in my opinion. The jokes were pretty bland too. The throwaway joke implying Helen Lovejoy was a man, that was just weird and does not fit with continuity at all. The only decent moment was Maggie in charge of the band. I like how she takes it upon herself to change the music they are playing after she sees Marge crying. Season 20, Episode 16, Eeny, Teeny, Maya, Mo. Mo develops an internet relationship with a woman named Maya. When the two meet face to face, he is surprised to discover that Maya is only 3 feet tall. So my trivia here is that when Mo turns on the television in Maya's house, it is showing a scene from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory featuring Oompa Loompas. And my best moment was the ending. This episode gets a 4 out of 5. This was at its core a very simple plot that once again tried to dive into how Mo is, and how hard it is for him to connect with people. They just seem to do the simple things well here. For example, a bit of them chatting online comes complete with all the awkward small talk and the nervous moments which that type of thing entails. When he does finally meet Maya, I do buy that they have a connection. As such, it was nice to see them spending time together. I'm kind of mixed on how I feel about their breakup though. On one hand, Mo was going a bit too far with his jokes, but other than that, he had been perfectly polite and kind with Maya. So when the episode tries to portray the conflict as Mo not accepting her for who she is, I'm not sure I buy it. I mean, Mo does acknowledge their differences, but seems to just go, who cares about it? Meanwhile, Maya, aside from making the odd joke herself, seems to want them to act like no differences exist. I mean, they're just two different ways of looking at it really, and I don't think one is necessarily right or wrong. It's all just differences in personality at the end of the day. I did want to see Mo succeed here, and because of that, a part of me does wish that they had stayed together. At least we got a great ending message out of the breakup though. Homer being the one to cheer Mo up like that. It was a very sweet moment. That seemed like it could come right out of season 2 or 3. The Maggie subplot was decent for what it was, even if it was a little brief. In terms of the jokes, they're okay, but not quite as good as some other classic Mo episodes. I did laugh at Cole saying, "With your face, who cares?" after Mo worries that Lenny's plan could blow up in his face. Overall, it was close to a 5, but came up just shy of it. It was probably on par with the season 9 episode Dumbbell Indemnity, if you want a direct comparison. Season 20, episode 17, The Good, the Sad, and the Drugly. When Milhouse gets suspended for a prank, Bart promises to visit him every day. However, he forgets about this when he meets a girl named Jenny. Meanwhile, Lisa gets put on antidepressants. So, the songs which play when Lisa takes the pills are What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong and Don't Worry Be Happy by Bobby McFerrin. My best moment here was Lisa's experience on the happy pills. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. This is another Bart gets a girlfriend type plot, which is starting to become very played out by this point in the show. Also, no doubt, Bart trying to become good to impress a girl absolutely borrows material from previous episodes. Despite this though, I do think they handled this story pretty well here. Probably better than all of the previous times this was tried. There was actually very little here I disliked. The plot was very cohesive, and unlike many episodes, this one did not abandon the premise it set up in Act 1. In fact, it was brought back in a major way towards the end of the episode, in a way which felt believable. Given that Bart and his girl were getting along so well together, it would be easy to see Milhouse as a villain for trying to break them up. However, if you see it from his perspective, it is totally justifiable. As he said, he has always been there for Bart, and even refused to rat him out earlier in the episode. All he gets in return is for Bart to forget about him, and break his promise of visiting him. This all came full circle with the ending. I like how Bart decided to man up and apologize to him instead of wallowing in the pity of his breakup. That message of not wallowing in pity also ties into Lisa's subplot, which I thought was great by the way. The smiley face visuals that Lisa has while on the pills were fantastic, and were definitely a memorable moment. As far as the comedy here, like most episodes this season, it was decent but not amazingly funny. I enjoyed the recurring gag of Nelson wanting Bart to punch people, as well as the reveal that Willie actually has a Swedish model girlfriend. This was just a very solid episode in all departments. Season 20, Episode 18, Father Knows Worst. When Homer believes that Bart's behavior and Lisa's unpopularity will jeopardize their future, he decides to take a more hands-on approach with his parenting style. So my trivia for this one is that Dan Castellaneta won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Voiceover Performance for playing Homer in this episode, and my best moment was Homer's helicopter parenting. This one gets a 3 out of 5. I don't have much to say about this one, as the themes explored here are not that deep really. It is just Homer realizing that things are not ideal with Bart and Lisa, and trying to fix them. It was solid enough, don't get me wrong. I did at least enjoy Homer's efforts here, even if he was as incompetent as ever. It also worked out well in the end, as Bart and Lisa both discover for themselves what it means to take some personal responsibility. The whole rivalry angle did not really work for me though, and the dream sequence Homer had felt a bit off. The jokes here were also not that good. I did enjoy Homer literally acting like a helicopter though. Marge's subplot, unlike Homer's helicopter, never really took off. I mean, let's be honest, it is a bit silly that the house has a sauna which they never discovered before. It also never really goes anywhere. It was mostly just used as an excuse to get Marge out of the way. This episode is fine, but not one which will stick in a memory. Season 20, Episode 19, Waverly Hills 9021 Doe. After Marge discovers the poor teaching conditions at Springfield Elementary, she gets Homer to rent an apartment in the Waverly Hills area, so Bart and Lisa can attend school there. So my trivia here is that the title is of course a parody of Beverly Hills 90210, and my best moment was the Waverly Hills song. This one is a 3 out of 5. This episode was in a similar vein to the last. It was a solid enough plot that does not ever feel inspired. The kids moving to a new school is not entirely original. but moving to a place like this, you could say is. I enjoyed Bart's bits at the school more, with the way he gets Wiggum to arrest him in order to give himself a bad boy image. Lisa's stuff was a bit boring to me. We have seen her try and fit in so many times before that it has gotten old, and bringing in a Hannah Montana parody does little to freshen it up. The Homer and Marge side of things was decent, if a little weird. I liked seeing Homer live in this rundown apartment, and how they had to fool this psycho school inspector. The ending was kind of meh though, with everything going back to normal rather abruptly. There was always at least a few good moments to always keep me entertained, even when the plot dragged. I liked the gag of the Ralph of the Waverly Hills school, and how even he can speak French. It was also good that we got to see Superintendent Chalmers outside of Springfield for a change. It is a nice reminder that he does actually manage other schools as well. As I said, the Waverly Hills theme tune I found pretty cool, both with the montage in the episode and the credits at the end. Season 20, Episode 20, Four Great Women and a Manicure. Marge takes Lisa to a nail salon for her first manicure. While there, they go through the tales of four famous women. So my trivia here is that this episode was viewed by 5.15 million viewers, making it the least watched episode of the show up until this point. And my best moment was Homer killing Dr. Hibbert. This one was, unfortunately, a 1 out of 5. This was a very poor episode really. I have said many times that I don't like these types of episodes much, and this one may be the worst one yet, probably even worse than the wettest stories ever told. I'm not even going to go into all of the stories separately, as they were all a bit bland. The Macbeth one was probably the best, just because it was the most creative. The scene where Homer kills Hibbert with the laughing gas I actually liked. It was not only very dark, it was also very well shot, with good animation and shadows. That was the only good moment here though, as the episode never had one joke which even remotely amused me. Lisa was portrayed as the stereotypical leftist feminist here. I just find that annoying, to be honest. And even if you agree with her political opinions, I think you would be hard pressed to actually find this version of Lisa entertaining. I know she goes down that road even more as the HD era goes on, so that is certainly not something I'm looking forward to. Season 20, Episode 21, Coming to Homerica. After their economy tanks, the unemployed people of Ogdenville flock to Springfield. At first, all goes well, but the people of Springfield soon get tired of them. So my trivia here is that the title of this episode is a reference to the 1988 film Coming to America, and my best moment here was the ending. This one is a 3 out of 5. This was another generally solid episode that has a few nice touches and decent jokes. Obviously the premise of the episode centered around immigration. In as far as that goes, I quite like the choice to make the Ogdenvillians Norwegian. It was far enough removed from Springfield that it made for an interesting contrast. Now the satire here was not groundbreaking or anything. The odd point was brought up about how people are happy for immigrants to take certain jobs, but not other ones. They also went out of their way to show both towns as mostly friendly towards each other. This was especially true during that upbeat ending, which was certainly promoting unity to some degree. They did also show the other side of the argument too, such as the scene of the Ogdenville people taking up all the space in hospital. The whole build a fence thing seemed a bit silly in the context of the episode, but I guess it got a bit more relevant with all the talk of the wall that Trump was apparently going to build. Basically, the satire here was a bit obvious at times, but I can at least appreciate the points they were trying to make. The humour was just okay. I liked the xylophone joke, along with Homer's justification of being scared by them. The Krusty Burger commercial at the start, with the obvious edit of Krusty taking a bite, was also good. Overall, it was an okay end to what has been an okay season. So that is all the season 20 episodes done, and here is a summary. The overall average score is a 3, which is the same as last year, and slightly better than I expected if I'm honest. My bottom 5 episodes of the year was Lisa the Drama Queen at 5, In the Name of the Grandfather at 4, Dangerous Curves at 3, Wedding for Disaster at 2, and Four Great Women and a Manicure at 1. My top 5 of the year was The Good, the Sad and the Drugly at 5, Treehouse of Horror 19 at 4, The Burns and the Bees at 3, Eeny Teeny Maya Mo at 2, and I found Gone Maggie Gone to be the best of the year, just about. So in terms of my overall feelings on this season, it was slightly better than I expected it to be, and even though it got the same rating as season 19, it went about it in a very different way. Last season just had loads of middle of the road, 3 rated episodes, while this one was much more up and down, with more 2s than 4s. I was actually surprised with the amount of 4 rated episodes here, but it does fit in with the eye test. I just enjoyed a fair few of these episodes. Of course, that comes with the caveat that this is the first season ever without a single 5 rated episode. And to be honest, I kinda feel a bit bad about this season having that unwanted honour. Because as I said, there were a fair few good episodes here, just not any real great ones. I mean, believe me, I wish I could sit here and say, look, it's the first HD season and already there is no 5s. What an ominous sign of things to come. And admittedly, it is rather ironic that the first HD season is the first without a 5, but I just can't really give this season too much stick, because as I said, it was mostly fine. Even the episodes which I did not enjoy that much were usually interesting to some degree. I think that's because the plotlines here were quite simple for the most part. It was mostly just a family working through certain issues. It very rarely got overly wacky or unbelievable. In terms of the characters here, the kids kind of shined through as more important than normal here. Bart and Lisa got a couple of spotlight episodes each here, and even episodes like Waverly Hills and How the Test Was Won were basically focused around schools and the education system. All of this was solid stuff, and just helped out with the story structure, I think. In terms of comedy, this was not the funniest season ever by any means. In fact, I would say that most of the teen seasons were probably funnier than this one, probably on account that they were more wacky and had more over-the-top jokes. I mean, there was some good jokes here, of course, but we definitely did not get as many gag-heavy episodes here. Overall, this season is on par with the last, and is a decent start to the HD era, and I will be more than happy if they maintain this quality for the next few seasons, but I'm certainly not holding my breath on that front. Anyway, if you guys have any questions or want to leave your thoughts on the 20th season, then feel free to do so in the comments below. That is it from me though for this video. I hope to see you all for season 21. As always, thank you all for watching and take care.